Every morning, as the first light of dawn painted the sky in hues of orange and pink, I embarked on my solitary walk through the quiet streets of my neighborhood. It had been 5 long years since my beloved wife passed away, leaving me to navigate life's labyrinth alone. Her absence was a constant ache, like an invisible wound that never fully healed. During these walks, memories of her would flood my mind, her laughter echoing through our garden, the warmth of her hand in mine, and the way she used to hum while tending to her roses. But today, lost in those bittersweet recollections, I failed to notice the cracked pavement beneath my feet. My foot caught on the uneven surface, sending me tumbling forward with a sickening thud. Pain shot through my knee, sharp and unrelenting, but it was nothing compared to the emotional weight I carried daily. As I sat there clutching my injured leg, I couldn't help but feel as though the universe itself conspired against me, mocking my attempts to find peace amidst the ruins of my past. This small accident felt symbolic, a cruel reminder that even the simplest joys, like my morning walks, were now tinged with danger and despair. As the days stretched into weeks, Mr. L's once peaceful routine began to unravel in ways he could never have anticipated. The subtle discomfort he had initially brushed off as a mere inconvenience evolved into something far more sinister. One night as the clock struck 2 a.m., Mr. L was jolted awake by an excruciating pain that gripped his lower abdomen. It was as though an unseen force had taken hold of his insides, twisting them with cruel precision. He stumbled to the bathroom, his legs trembling beneath him, only to find no relief. This wasn't just discomfort, it was agony, and it left him drenched in cold sweat, clutching the edge of the sink for support. The following morning, still unnerved by the previous night's ordeal, Mr. L ventured into his beloved garden, seeking solace among the plants that had always brought him peace. But fate seemed determined to strip away even this small comfort. As he bent down to prune a rose bush, a sudden searing pain shot through his abdomen, nearly causing him to collapse. His gardening shears clattered to the ground as he steadied himself against the trellis, gasping for air. For a moment, he thought he might faint right there amidst the blooms he cherished so deeply. The vibrant colors of the flowers blurred before his eyes, replaced by a haze of panic and dread. But the worst was yet to come. Later that evening, while attempting to empty his bladder after another restless day, Mr. L was met with a sight that sent chills down his spine. Blood. Not just a trace, but a startling crimson streak that defied explanation. His heart pounded in his chest as fear gripped him like a vice. Thoughts raced through his mind. Was this the beginning of something catastrophic? Had he ignored the warning signs for too long? The calm, methodical man who prided himself on self-reliance now felt utterly powerless, shaken to his core by what he saw as a betrayal of his own body. That night, sleep eluded him entirely. Every creak of the house echoed louder than usual, amplifying his anxiety. Each tick of the clock felt like a countdown to answers he wasn't sure he was ready to face. As the days turned into weeks, Mr. L's once peaceful life began to unravel like a fraying rope under immense strain. The changes in his urination habits had escalated from minor inconveniences to full-blown disruptions that left him physically and emotionally drained. His children, noticing the toll it was taking on him, tried to intervene. "Dad, you need to see a doctor," his son urged one evening over dinner, his voice laced with a concern. But Mr. L balked at the suggestion, his pride flaring up like a wildfire. "I'm fine, it's just part of getting older," he snapped back, his tone sharp enough to cut through the tension-filled air. His daughter chimed in, her words softer but no less insistent. Dad, ignoring this won't make it go away. What if it's something serious? The argument grew heated, each side digging their heels in deeper. To Mr. L, going to the doctor felt like an admission of weakness, a betrayal of the self-reliance he had always prided himself on. Yet, deep down, a flicker of doubt began to gnaw at him. That night, as rain lashed against the windows and thunder roared like an angry beast, Mr. L found himself awake yet again, his bladder demanding attention with relentless urgency. The storm outside mirrored the tempest within him, restless, chaotic, and unyielding. He stumbled out of bed, his legs stiff and unsteady from fatigue, and made his way to the bathroom. The hallway was dark, save for the occasional flash of lightning that illuminated the walls in eerie bursts. Each step felt heavier than the last, weighed down not just by exhaustion, but by the growing dread that something was terribly wrong. When he reached the toilet, his haste got the better of him. In his rush, his foot caught on the edge of the bath mat, sending him crashing to the cold, hard floor with a thud that echoed through the silent house. Pain shot through his hip, sharp and searing, leaving him gasping for breath. For a moment he lay there, drenched in humiliation and fear, the storm raging both inside and out. The irony wasn't lost on him. He had refused help when it was offered, only to end up sprawled on the floor, vulnerable and alone. As he struggled to sit up, clutching his side, he realized how foolish he had been. This wasn't just about stubbornness anymore. It was about survival. By morning, the storm had passed, but its aftermath lingered, not just in the soreness of his body, but in the clarity of his mind. Mr. L sat at the kitchen table, staring blankly at his untouched breakfast, replaying the events of the previous night. The fall had shaken him to his core, forcing him to confront the reality he'd been avoiding. His children were right. He couldn't keep pretending everything was fine. That afternoon, he picked up the phone and scheduled an appointment with his doctor. It wasn't easy swallowing his pride, but the thought of another sleepless night, another fall, or worse, propelled him forward. Little did he know this decision would mark the beginning of a journey toward reclaiming not just his health, but also his peace of mind. As Mr. L grappled with his own urinary issues, he began to realize just how widespread these problems were among people his age, and how devastating their consequences could be if left unchecked. What had started as a personal struggle soon revealed itself to be part of a much larger, darker reality. One afternoon, while tending to his garden, Mr. L received a phone call that sent shockwaves through him. His close friend, Harold, had taken his own life. The news hit like a thunderclap, leaving Mr. L reeling. Harold had been battling similar urinary problems for months, but had kept it hidden from everyone, too ashamed to speak about it. He didn't want anyone to see him as weak, another mutual friend confided during the somber gathering afterward. The embarrassment ate away at him until there was nothing left. It was a grim reminder of the silent toll such conditions could take, not just on physical health, but on mental well-being too. The tragedy of Harold's death weighed heavily on Mr. L, but it wasn't long before another harrowing event brought the dangers even closer to home. A few weeks later, Mr. L learned that his neighbor, Mrs. Peterson, had been rushed to the hospital in critical condition. She had ignored persistent symptoms of a urinary tract infection, UTI, dismissing them as an inevitable nuisance of aging. By the time she sought help, the infection had spiraled out of control, leading to sepsis, a life-threatening complication where the body's response to infection causes widespread inflammation and organ failure. When Mr. L visited her in the hospital, pale and frail amidst tubes and machines, she whispered weakly, "I thought it would go away on its own. I didn't think it could get this bad." Her words haunted him, underscoring the lethal consequences of neglecting seemingly minor health concerns. These events forced Mr. L to confront not only his fears, but also the grim realities faced by countless older adults who suffered in silence. He realized that urinary issues weren't merely inconvenient. They were deeply intertwined with emotional and psychological burdens that many found unbearable. The shame and isolation stemming from these conditions often led to depression, anxiety, and tragically, even suicide. For every person quietly enduring the discomfort, there was a story waiting to unfold, one filled with pain, regret, and missed opportunities for intervention. Harold's tragic end and Mrs. Peterson's fight for survival served as stark warnings of what lay ahead if he, how about I or others chose to ignore the signs any longer. Determined not to let fear dictate his future, Mr. L resolved to break the cycle of silence surrounding urinary health. He began sharing his experiences with trusted friends, encouraging open conversations about topics once deemed taboo. Each discussion felt like chipping away at a wall of stigma, slowly replacing secrecy with understanding. Yet beneath his newfound resolve lingered a sobering awareness. The stakes were higher than ever. If he faltered, if he failed to act decisively, the shadow of Harold's loss and Mrs. Peterson's fragile recovery would loom over him, a constant reminder of what was at risk. As Mr. L delved deeper into understanding the root causes of his urinary issues, he began to uncover the harsh realities that many older adults face when dealing with conditions like benign prostatic hyperplasia, BPH. What started as a quest for answers soon turned into a chilling exploration of the potential consequences of untreated or poorly managed symptoms. During one of his conversations with his doctor, Mr. L learned about a close friend's harrowing experience. A man who had delayed treatment for years despite worsening BPH symptoms. Eventually, the condition escalated to such an extent that surgery became unavoidable. The procedure itself was fraught with risks, a delicate operation on the prostate gland that required precision and carried the possibility of life-altering complications. Though the surgery aimed to alleviate the obstruction caused by the enlarged prostate, it left the patient permanently dependent on an external urine collection bag. For someone who had always valued independence, this outcome was nothing short of devastating. The story didn't end there. Another acquaintance of Mr. L wasn't as fortunate. This individual, also suffering from severe urinary retention due to untreated BPH, found himself in a medical emergency that sent shockwaves through their community. One evening, after weeks of ignoring persistent fatigue and swelling in his legs, he collapsed at home and was rushed to the hospital unconscious. Doctors diagnosed him with acute kidney failure, a dire result of prolonged pressure on the kidneys from an overfull bladder that couldn't drain properly. His organs were on the brink of shutting down completely, requiring immediate dialysis and intensive care. It was a race against time, and while the doctors managed to stabilize him, the damage done to his kidneys was irreversible. From that day forward, he would require lifelong medical interventions just to survive. These stories weighed heavily on Mr. L's mind, painting a grim picture of what could happen if he ignored his own symptoms any longer. He realized how easily things could spiral being out of control, turning manageable health issues into catastrophic events. Each detail, the image of his friend tethered to a urine bag, the frantic phone call alerting neighbors about the emergency, the sterile hum of machines keeping someone felt like a warning etched in stone. Even more alarming was the knowledge that these scenarios weren't rare anomalies, but rather common outcomes for those who neglected their urinary health. For women, the stakes were equally high. A neighbor once confided in Mr. L about her struggle with stress incontinence, which stemmed from weakened pelvic floor muscles after childbirth. Despite trying various treatments, she eventually opted for corrective surgery. While the procedure helped improve her quality of life, it came with its own set of challenges, including months of painful recovery and lingering anxiety about future complications. These accounts reinforced Mr. Lowe's growing conviction addressing urinary problems early wasn't merely a matter of convenience. It was a fight for dignity, autonomy, and survival. As Mr. L continued to grapple with his own urinary symptoms, a chilling story from the local hospital served as a grim reminder of what could happen if he ignored his body's signals any longer. A neighbor's cousin, a man in his late 60s, had dismissed subtle changes in his urination habits for nearly 2 years, chalking them up to just getting older. What started as occasional nighttime trips to the bathroom eventually turned into excruciating pain and blood in his urine. By the time he sought medical attention, it was too late. Doctors diagnosed him with advanced bladder cancer that had already spread to other organs. Despite aggressive treatment, the disease claimed his life within months. His family later revealed that early-stage warning signs, like frequent urination and discomfort, had been present long before his diagnosis but were tragically overlooked. The man's final days were filled with regret, not just for himself but also for leaving behind loved ones who would forever wonder if things could have ended differently. This harrowing tale weighed heavily on Mr. L's mind, especially when he reflected on how close he had come to missing his own chance at timely intervention. Just weeks earlier, he had almost canceled his doctor's appointment out of stubbornness and fear. As he sat in the waiting room, gripping the arms of his chair nervously, he couldn't shake off the thought that one small decision to delay or dismiss his symptoms could have cost him everything. During the consultation, his doctor confirmed something startling. Even minor issues like persistent urgency or slight discomfort during urination could signal serious underlying conditions. A single symptom, the doctor emphasized, can be the difference between catching a problem early and facing irreversible damage. For Mr. L, this revelation hit hard. He realized now more than ever that paying attention to these seemingly insignificant details wasn't just about comfort, it was about survival. If he hadn't acted when he did, who knows where he might have ended up? Would he have become another cautionary tale whispered among neighbors? Or worse, would his children face the same heartbreak endured by the families of those who left things too late? The gravity of this realization only deepened when his doctor shared yet another sobering account. A patient whose life had been saved simply because she reported noticing an unusual smell in her urine. That faint odor led to tests revealing an aggressive kidney infection that, without prompt treatment, could have escalated into sepsis, a potentially fatal condition. It was a stark contrast to the fate of others who waited until their symptoms became unbearable. These stories reinforced in Mr. L the importance of vigilance. Even the smallest clue, be it frequency, color, consistency, or odor, was worth investigating. Ignoring such signs wasn't merely negligence, it was gambling with one's life. By the end of the visit, Mr. L felt both shaken and empowered. Each moment of hesitation he'd experienced leading up to this point seemed foolish in hindsight. The lesson was clear. Every sign mattered, no matter how trivial it appeared. For Mr. L, this newfound awareness marked the beginning of a deeper commitment, not just to monitor his health, but to cherish the gift of time itself. As Mr. L continued to reflect on his own urinary health struggles, he couldn't help but recall a harrowing incident that had recently shaken his workplace, a stark reminder of the dangers of holding in urine for too long. It involved one of his colleagues, Sarah, who had always prided herself on her ability to tough it out during long meetings or busy workdays without taking breaks to use the restroom. One fateful afternoon, Sarah pushed herself beyond her limits, ignoring the persistent urge to urinate as she powered through back-to-back conference calls and deadlines. The pressure in her bladder became unbearable, but instead of excusing herself, she clenched her fists and soldiered on, thinking it was just a matter of endurance. Moments later, an agonizing scream echoed through the office. Sarah collapsed at her desk, clutching her abdomen in excruciating pain. She was rushed to the hospital, where doctors delivered devastating news. Her bladder had ruptured due to excessive pressure, requiring emergency surgery to repair the damage. The recovery process was grueling, leaving her bedridden for weeks and haunted by the realization that a simple trip to the bathroom could have prevented such a catastrophic outcome. This chilling event hit close to home for Mr. L, stirring up memories of his own near-miss experience. Just months earlier, he had found himself stuck in traffic while desperately searching for a gas station restroom. The urgency to relieve himself grew overwhelming with each passing minute, yet he stubbornly resisted pulling over, convinced he could hold on until he reached his destination. His decision proved reckless when another driver suddenly swerved into his lane, causing him to slam on the brakes. In that split second, panic surged through his body, not only from the collision, but also from the unbearable pressure in his bladder. Though the accident itself wasn't severe, the emotional toll lingered long after the car was repaired. He realized then how dangerous it was to prioritize convenience over bodily needs, especially given the fragile state of his aging urinary system. These stories served as grim warnings about the consequences of neglecting basic physiological signals. For Mr. L, they underscored the importance of listening to his body and addressing its demands promptly. Holding in urine might seem like a harmless habit, but the reality was far more sinister. Chronic retention not only increased the risk of infections and kidney damage, but could also lead to life-altering emergencies, as evidenced by Sarah's ordeal and his own brush with disaster. Each time he felt the familiar discomfort building, he now reminded himself of the potential fallout if he ignored it: ruptured bladders, car accidents, and lives forever altered by preventable mistakes. These reflections fueled his determination to break free from harmful habits, replacing them with mindful practices that prioritized both physical safety and dignity. Changing lifelong habits was never going to be easy for Mr. L, but as his urinary health issues grew more pronounced, he realized that clinging to old ways would only lead him down a dangerous path. The hardest battle wasn't physical, it was mental. Each night as he lay awake after yet another trip to the bathroom, his mind became a battlefield of conflicting thoughts. Should he go through with the surgery his doctor had recommended? It wasn't just about the procedure itself, it was about what came afterward: the recovery process, the potential risks, and most dauntingly, the possibility of living with a permanent change in how his body functioned. For days, he wrestled with this decision, imagining worst-case scenarios. What if something went wrong during the operation? What if he lost control over his bladder entirely? These fears gnawed at him, making every moment feel heavier than the last. But even before considering surgery, there were smaller sacrifices he knew he couldn't avoid, like giving up alcohol, one of his few remaining indulgences. Wine had always been more than just a drink for Mr. L. It was part of his evening ritual, a way to unwind after tending to his garden or reflecting on life's complexities. Yet now the very thing that once brought him comfort posed a direct threat to his well-being. Alcohol irritated his bladder, worsened his symptoms, and made sleep, an already elusive luxury, even harder to achieve. Giving it up felt like losing a piece of himself, a reminder of how much his life had shifted since these problems began. On several occasions, he found himself reaching for the bottle, only to stop midway, guilt washing over him. Was it worth risking everything he had worked so hard to preserve? The struggle didn't end there. Adjusting to healthier habits required discipline he hadn't needed in decades. Drinking enough water throughout the day seemed simple enough, yet it demanded constant reminders. He often caught himself forgetting until late afternoon when dehydration left him feeling sluggish and irritable. Then there was the challenge of cutting back on caffeine, which he loved almost as much as wine. His morning coffee had been sacred, a ritual he cherished. But now even that small pleasure came with consequences. Every sip seemed to mock him, reminding him of the compromises he had to make. Despite these challenges, Mr. L slowly began to embrace the changes, not because they were easy, but because he understood their necessity. Each small victory, choosing water over wine, resisting the urge to hold his urine too long, committing to pelvic floor exercises, felt monumental. They weren't just steps toward better health, they were acts of defiance against fear and resignation. Though the road ahead remained uncertain, he clung to hope, knowing that each choice brought him closer to reclaiming the vibrant life he once knew. The battle Mr. L faced was not just physical, it was a relentless war waged within his own mind. As the nights grew longer and darker, so did his thoughts. Each sleepless hour was consumed by a torrent of what-ifs that gnawed at his sanity. What if the treatment failed? What if he couldn't afford it? What if this was simply his fate, to live with discomfort and fear for the rest of his days? The weight of these questions pressed down on him like an invisible force, suffocating any semblance of peace. His once peaceful evenings now became arenas of internal conflict, where hope clashed violently with despair. He would lie awake, staring at the ceiling, replaying every doctor's warning, every statistic about untreated urinary issues, until the room seemed to close in around him. The turning point came when his doctor presented two options: an expensive surgical procedure that promised relief but required financial sacrifice, or learning to manage his symptoms without intervention, a decision that felt akin to surrender. This choice tore at the fabric of his being. On one hand, the surgery offered a chance to reclaim his life, but its cost loomed large over his modest savings. On the other hand, accepting his condition meant resigning himself to a diminished quality of life, burdened by constant discomfort and uncertainty. Each option carried its own kind of pain: financial strain versus emotional defeat, and the pressure of making the right decision left him paralyzed with doubt. One particularly restless night, as rain pattered against his window, Mr. L found himself sitting in the dim glow of his bedside lamp, clutching medical brochures and receipts from consultations. Tears welled up in his eyes as he realized the gravity of his predicament. It wasn't just about choosing a treatment. It was about confronting his deepest fears of aging, of helplessness, of losing control. Yet, amidst the storm inside him, a flicker of resolve began to grow. He thought of his garden, how even the most fragile plants could thrive with care and attention. If he could nurture them back to health, surely he owed himself the same effort. By morning the wearer, Mr. L had made his choice. He would fight for his dignity, for his future, and for the vibrant life he refused to let slip away. The road ahead would be fraught with challenges, but he understood now that ignoring his body's cries for help was no longer an option. Every step forward, no matter how daunting, was a declaration of resilience.